Okay, welcome back to S6 Philosophy. We've been talking about Karl Marx, the humanist Karl Marx, um, and this idea of alienation. Speaking of alienation, I don't know if you're aware of the Charlie Chaplin movie called Modern Times, and there's this scene there where, as a worker, Chaplin is he's really in the machinery. And if you, although that's probably not the message of this particular scene, but you can see here, we're not sure if he's, feeling any joy in this kind of work. But this scene actually reminded me of the "This is fine" meme. You know, from the point of view of Marx, this is the factory system, industrialization. Um, this has brought about misery for the worker. You're just one among many faceless, anonymous, replaceable workers in the factory. Um, but then I suppose part of you as a worker would try to convince yourself that everything is fine, even though the house is on fire. Okay, maybe that's the situation of the modern worker as well. Now, Um, in this recording, I wanted to talk about three different meanings of alienation. Okay, we've already seen the first one. So the first one is that the product of the laborer becomes alienated. It's an alien product. Why? Because it's no longer a product of your own creativity. It's, what's the motivation behind the production of this object is greed on the part of the capitalist and survival on the part of the worker. Okay, the object has become almost totally independent of the worker. It doesn't really matter who you are, in order to produce this work. So there's that, very deep, if I don't know if you can call that deep, but there's that real disconnect between the worker and the product of her work. Okay, the product has nothing to do with the humanity of the worker, not anymore at least. So imagine, working in a factory and you're helping to produce something that has nothing to do with you. It's not really a product of your humanity. Okay, imagine this. Why is it that sometimes when we get our work back from our teachers and then we see that a paper or a test has gotten a low grade, sometimes we feel hurt. Why is that? Because we might say to ourselves, oh, I really put so much time and effort into this, I really put myself into this, and then this is the grade that I get. I think it's unfair. I think, there's been a mistake. I don't think, the teacher saw the value and the effort, that I put into this work. So there's that real identification that we make between us and the product of our labor. That shows you that there's that connection. But the problem is in capitalist societies that connection has been severed. It's no longer there. You produce things that don't necessarily come out of or express who you are. Secondly, labor as an activity itself, is alienating. The very act of working is alienating. Why is this? Because in modern society, in capitalist societies, you would have, factory work where labor is specialized. So there's division of labor, and you're usually assigned a kind of task that anyone can do. Okay, especially if we're talking about blue collar workers. Okay, just ordinary workers working in a factory. You're part of the assembly line. Your work might be, pushing buttons or sorting stuff or putting a cap on something. And this is something that you do for what? At least 8 hours a day in and day out, 7 times a week. Sorry, six days a week. And you keep on doing this repetitive work. It's anonymous because you don't really express yourself, as we've already said. You know, who you are doesn't really matter to the work because anyone can take your place. You're a cog in the machine, and the cog, can be replaced. That particular component can be replaced by anyone. I don't know. Maybe you can remember the first Incredibles movie when Mr. Incredible, I don't remember his name, is called into the boss's office, and the boss was trying to explain to him that he was a cog in the machine, and you know he had to act like that, like, he's part of something big, and he's just somebody who can be replaced at any moment. So work is meaningless. Like we said, it doesn't express you. It doesn't affirm your nature. You're not working in order to express yourself or to be true to yourself, but you're working in order to survive. That's what you're doing. And so, as a worker, you really stand out of work. It's not something that you feel you belong to. It's not something that's really part of you anymore. And so, while you stand outside of work, you also stand outside of yourself because you're not being true to what or who you really are. If Marx is correct in articulating this idea of the human being as homo faber, as the worker, man the worker. And it's true. Look at this quotation, for instance. He is at home when he is not working, and when he is working, he is not at home. Why is it that so many people nowadays hate their work and they can only be themselves when they're outside of work? That means that work is alienating. You're not able to be your true self while you're working. That's why we call it work. And then the weekend is something that's there for us to have a little bit of fun, and we're able to kick off our shoes. You can say, let your hair down, let your guard down, be more of yourself when you're outside work. So we're not at home, we're alienated. We're not where we're supposed to be. We're not being who we're supposed to be. That's the second sense of alienation. Work itself is alienating. The third sense is this, perhaps the most abstract meaning of alienation. In modern capitalist societies, we have become alienated from the rest of humanity. I think we all have this sense, this innate sense, and Marx tells us that, reminds us that we do have a sense normally of belonging to humanity. There's a certain universality to being a human being. You're not only you're also part of humanity in general. Okay? You are part of this particular species. And when you act, you don't only act for yourself, but for all of humanity. We all want to have this sense of contributing to the welfare, the good of everyone else, of the community, of the human race, right? We have that sense. We have, however small, however superficial, we have this feeling that we belong to this group. And we want to be able to contribute to further, the welfare, the interests of humankind itself. you have this idea in Sartre as well, remember? At least this universal aspect that when he says, whenever you act, it's as though you paint a picture of humanity. It's not only you. You're totally free as an individual, but you don't exist in a vacuum. So it's just, it might not exactly be the same idea, but you have this idea of universality. Now, secondly, human action, properly speaking, human action is a conscious activity. That you are aware of what you're doing and you're doing it for a particular goal. And this is our essential being, that we are able to act freely, that we're able to express ourselves, and in expressing ourselves actually contribute to the betterment of everyone else. But then, what do we do nowadays? We are no longer engaged in conscious human activity. Work has become so meaningless, repetitive, anonymous, so alienating, that we just go through the motions. We try to go to work every day. We tend to hate it. We're so relieved when it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. We can get off work. We can go home. Then forget about everything that happened, and because nothing really significant happens at work. Nowadays we work in order to survive. And so this idea of being a universal being connected to everyone else and working, engaging in this conscious, deliberate activity, that's out the window. These things are no longer there. So we have become estranged from ourselves. We've become estranged from the product of our labor. We've become estranged from our nature as creators, as makers. And we have been estranged from humanity itself. We've been forced to bow to other people, to work in order to enrich other people. While we try to survive, we make other people rich. We've also lost, it's not only that we lost this connection to humanity, we've lost this sense of being equal beings, equal makers, laborers, equal to everyone else. We've had to sell our labor in order to survive and accept, a few people, namely from Marx's point of view, the capitalists, those who control the means of production. We've been forced to subordinate ourselves to them. As you can see in this picture, this is what we do. We have become slaves in order to, satisfy the greed of very few people. So what is the economic system that produces alienation the most? I think it's clear, But even so, in this time of crisis, in most societies, I hope, with capitalist economic systems, we're becoming aware again of the importance of workers, of ordinary laborers, ordinary workers. Some of them we describe as being frontliners. Nowadays we call them essential workers. We're beginning to see their value again, and even though their work might involve experiences of suffering, misery, sacrifice, illness, and death. A lot of workers are being appreciated again and are able to connect to humanity, to see how important their work is and how they can contribute to the welfare of all humankind. Okay, that's it. See you in the next lesson.